They Shot Kennedy takes place in November 1963 in Madison, Wisconsin, at a fictional high school called Thorstein Veblen High. My protagonist is Franklin Roosevelt Cribbs, known to his friends as Cribbsy, and in this dialogue he's talking to his friend Casey Dworkin. And we begin. Look, Cribbsy, I need to talk to you. That's why I followed you here. Can't we do this after school? No, I'm busy after school. I'm going to be seeing her. Seeing who? Her. Her who? Cribbsy? What? I need to confide in you. I need to get to class. To verify this, I was resolutely walking in the direction of the B wing. Well, I'll walk along with you, said Casey. He wasn't going to let go. Nobody was going to let go of me. Not Volkman, not Yago, not Palindrome, and his fucking dwarfs. Nobody. Cribbsy? Mm-hmm. I'm in love. I stopped. What? I looked at him. His eyes were dreamy. There was a sort of sickly half smile on his great big handsome face. Jesus Christ. He was in love. I'm in love, he said again, needlessly. Already? He looked less dreamy. I said, Jesus, Casey, what's it been? 2 weeks? Not even that. What's time got to do with it? I thought you were swearing off girls. She's not a girl. She's a woman. I didn't want to hear this. I headed for class again. Yeah, right. They all are. No, really. Who is she? Casey grabbed my arm and made me look deep into his eyes. If I tell you, you have to promise. Promise what? Not to scoff. Scoff. Or disapprove. Why the hell should I disapprove? I don't even care. It's your funeral, Case. I had already figured it out. Casey was suffering withdrawal symptoms from Pamela Rush. He had a case of the bends. In the back of my mind, I recalled seeing them together during lunch hour. So I figured logically Casey was trying to win Pamela back. He had formed a whole new vision of her and him with her and them together. Now he wanted to share that sickening vision with me. Why me? I need to share this with someone, said Casey. See? My heart, he said, is bursting. My arms are tired, I replied. I've never known anyone so much like me, so compatible, so sympathetic and wise, said Casey as I speeded up. She sees right through me. She knows what I'm thinking before I think it. Well, I said, spotting the B-wing, you've known each other quite a while, but not long enough. Well, he stopped me again, clutching my shoulders, breathing into my face. I smelled his lunch. She even shares my faith. His faith? In what? She's Jewish. Pamela Rush, I said, astounded, is Jewish? Pamela Rush, said Casey. I was still astounded. Casey, I said, you're Jewish? You? Of course. No shit? No shit. This was a pleasant revelation to me. I'd always wanted a Jewish friend. Cool, I said. Cribbsy, I'm not in love with Pamela Rush, said Casey. That's all over. I thought you knew that. Well, I saw you guys at lunch hour. Talk. I'm in love with Rachel, he blurted. Rachel? I didn't know anyone named Rachel. There wasn't a single girl at Veblen High named Rachel. Maybe it was some girl he met at the pad. I said, Rachel who? Rachel Porch. Casey still had hold of my shoulders, still staring wetly into my eyes, still breathing breaded veal and buttered string beans up my nose. He'd given me the girl's full name, but I still couldn't place her. Maybe she was new in school? Maybe she was a freshman? That's all we needed. Casey Dworkin going steady with some jailbait ninth grader. Rachel Pope. Okay, then it hit me. Jesus Christ, Dworkin. He released his grip in the spray of my saliva. Mrs. Porch? God, Cribbs, not so. You're in love with Mrs. Porch? Shh. And she's Jewish? Of course. A teacher? Shh. A Jewish teacher?
Eddie carefully steered his pickup down the boat ramp and onto the lake surface. He wasn't worried about breaking through the ice today. The temperature had dropped below zero for 5 straight nights, so the surface had to be at least 2 feet thick, plenty strong enough to support the old Ford. Eddie accelerated, spinning the tires and fishtailing a little on the slick surface until the truck gained traction and started crawling ahead toward Anderson Bay. It wouldn't take long to get there. The lake was just a couple miles across. No need to rush. All he had was time, as business was slow this time of year. He glanced at his watch. It was only after 2, and there was still plenty of light left. It had been overcast, but was beginning to clear up. The clouds were coming apart, tearing away like pieces of cotton candy. Patches of sunlight glided across the snow-covered surface like great silent birds. Eddie glanced at the worn Nikon lying next to the sleeping dog in the passenger seat. This wasn't the best time of year for a realtor to take pictures of a property, but he wasn't looking for pretty today, just accurate. The appraisers needed an idea of the lay of the land, and this was the best time of year to do that. When the trees were bare, the land was revealed. All the dells, rises, boulders, and beds. The forest couldn't hide anything in January. A vision, Jay had said. We need a vision of what we have on Moon Lake. Well, thought Eddie, scanning the shoreline as the truck drew closer to the bay. If you want a vision of the land, Jay, drag your fat ass down here to see it yourself. Walk through it, smell it, listen to it. There's no other way to know it. Jay had only been down to the lake once when he had first hired him 3 months ago, and even then he hadn't gotten out of the car. Eddie's dad had asked him to show Jay around when he first arrived, and ever since then, Jay seemed to think of Eddie as his errand boy. Can you give me some pictures of this lot? Can you set up this appointment with the DNR people? Eddie knew his dad had brought Jay in to consult on a very important project and had asked his son to help him however he could, but Eddie was sick of being his gopher. Still, it was for his father. His dad always did things for a reason, and Eddie trusted him. After all, his father had built up Lakeside Realty from nothing and made it into a good, solid business, a business that would be his someday. And once I get the chance, I'll turn Lakeland into something big, something special. Someday soon, sooner than anybody would like. His father had been sick a long time, and they knew now he wasn't going to get better. The old man had waited too long to get into the doctor's office. The cancer was everywhere. Eddie steered away from the east end of the bay, where one of the springs that fed the lake welled up unceasing, unchanging, no matter the season. It was never ending, like the lake's heartbeat. The ice was always thinner over the spring, worn away by the current, and while he wasn't too worried about breaking through this time of year, it didn't pay to take chances. He pulled up by the big boulder next to the beach, the one he and Will used to play on when they were kids. King of the Hill. They found it on one of their canoe expeditions, exploring different locations on the wild shore, discovering secret new places. This had been one of them. They'd come here a lot. The water was deep off the high end of the rock, almost 6 feet. Whoever could push the other off won. Me, mostly. Even though he was younger, he'd always been bigger and stronger than his brother, and that had pissed off Will something fierce. Eddie smiled to himself as he glanced up at the treetops. The light was good, with sunlight streaming in pretty consistently now behind the naked trees lining the shore and exposing the land hiding underneath the sleeping branches. Eddie picked up the camera. Jimbo, his dog, disturbed by the movement, lifted his head and looked up, blinking in the bright sunlight. He was half blind and a little more than half deaf. His muzzle, once jet black, was now dappled with gray, and his eyes were covered with a milky film. Jimbo looked around and shivered. He'd slept the entire way. Well, he is 16. Hey, Jimbo, said Eddie, want to take a walk? The tail predictably started thumping on the seat as the old dog struggled to get up. He stood and stretched as Eddie checked the camera and pulled on his gloves. He opened the car door, stepped out, and gasped a little as the bitter air hit him. His throat tightened as he took a breath. It was always colder out here in the lake. There was nothing to stop the wind. Jumbo walked across the seat, hesitated as he eyed up the ground, and then jumped down, skittering a little on the ice. Eddie shut the door and walked up to the big rock, the snow squeaking underfoot. It was funny. He hadn't been this close to the boulder for nearly 20 years, yet all its little crevices, rips, and cracks were as familiar to him as if he'd been there yesterday, wrestling with his brother, trying to push him into the lake. Funny how you remember things. He walked a few steps to his left, flipped the mitten half off his glove, and lined up the shot. He'd thought that they could use this layout. The first lot would ideally begin right at that white pine and then stretch north about 150 feet. That would include the whole beach. If they took it 200 feet deep, there'd be more than enough room to build. He clicked off one shot of his ideal south lot line. He walked over, sliding really, on the slick surface, and got a shot of the north line. Jimbo shambled behind him, trying to keep his footing. Eddie wished he had one of those new cameras with a panoramic feature, but his dad said they couldn't afford it. Eddie knew it wasn't the money, though. He just wanted to keep things the way they were. That was all. A burst of wind caused Eddie to step sideways. Shit, he said aloud. It's cold. He looked at the shoreline again. Yeah, he had all the photos they needed. If Jay wasn't happy with him, he could bring his own sorry ass out here and do it himself. He looked around. Jimbo was sitting on the ice, one paw raised. He was freezing. Come on, Jimbo. Come on, boy. The dog took a step and stopped, shivering. Eddie sighed and went over. He petted him and grasped his collar and pulled. Jimbo pulled back, took a step, and then broke into a gimpy sort of walk. Poor guy. These trips are hard on him, especially in the wintertime. Eddie opened the door, helped Jimbo into the truck, and then climbed in behind him. It was already cold inside the cab. The sunlight had kept it a little warm, but not as much as usual. Eddie started it up and swung the wheel around, letting the back end fishtail a little bit. Just like when I was a kid, going out on Moon Lake and doing donuts with the boys. Hell, why not? He jerked the wheel over, stamped on the accelerator, and laughed out loud as the old truck spun around in circles, sliding sideways across the lake. The shore spun crazily in front of him, the sound of his own laughter, almost muffled by Jimbo's frantic barking. Yeah, he thought, straightening out the wheel. Yeah, those were the days. Hush, Jimbo, he said, patting the still frantically barking dog. Poor guy. It's got to be tough being deaf and half blind and not being able to move around much. Well, at least he doesn't know he's dying. That's one small consolation. Eddie continued absentmindedly petting the dog as he started heading toward the landing, toward home.
Hello, I'm reading from All Hallows Shadows, featuring Detective Pete Stone and set in 1930s Wichita, Kansas. I'm Michael D. Graves. The telephone rang. It sat on the table alongside an ashtray and a pack of Chesterfields. I reached for the telephone with one hand and the cigarettes with the other. Yes, hello, I said into the receiver. I shook a cigarette from the pack and a masculine voice came over the line. Good morning, is this Mr. Stone? Am I speaking to Mr. Pete Stone? My reply was interrupted by a sound of bells. Bells tinkling in tune along with gongs and chimes, in chorus with cuckoos and chirps. Unlike the harsh clangs of the telephone, however, these lullabies greeted me each morning and eased me to sleep each night. My collection of clocks heralded the hours: the Black Forest cuckoo clock, the Seth Thomas grandfather clock, the recently acquired Austrian Zappler animated clock, and over a dozen others scattered throughout the house. The owner of the voice at the other end of the line heard the chimes too and was wise enough to hold his tongue until they ceased. I used the respite to cradle the phone on my shoulder and hold a match to a cigarette. Each clock sounded 9 times in unison. I prided myself on their accuracy. When they ceased their recital, the voice spoke again. It sounded impatient. Well, finally, please tell me, have I reached Mr. Pete Stone? Yes, you have, and a good morning to you, sir. I saw no reason to be unpleasant. The day had just begun. It still held promise, and I still had hope. My sunny tone must have caught the speaker off guard. There was a pause, then he continued. Mr. Stone, my name is Fallon, Dr. Wilfred Fallon, and I am a professor of English at Wichita University. I'm calling you because you've been recommended to me. That is, someone I trust suggested I give you a call. He cleared his throat and continued. Please forgive me for ringing you at home, Mr. Stone, but I tried your office and your secretary said you hadn't arrived yet. It is now 9 o'clock in the morning. May I ask what time you usually begin your day? You may ask, I said, but my answer is none of your business. I rethought my earlier decision to remain pleasant. Of course, you're correct. Please forgive me. Your personal schedule is none of my business. Maybe I should start again. I'm afraid I've been under a bit of a strain lately, and I haven't been myself. It's been some time since I've been so baffled by circumstances and so unsure about how to proceed. That's why I called. As I mentioned, you come recommended to me by someone I admire and respect. I'm calling to inquire into the particulars of engaging your services. I mulled over the caller's priggish vocabulary. Most of my clients just hired me. No one in memory had ever inquired into the particulars of engaging my services. What's this about, Professor Fallon? I'm not sure how to begin. Are you familiar with the murder of a recent university graduate? It's been in the papers. I assured Fallon that I had read about the crime. I read the papers. According to the reports, a young woman was stabbed and a suspect was caught soon after the body was discovered. The case hasn't gone to trial, but the police are confident they have the guilty party in custody. It appears to be open and shut. Yes, that's right, the professor said. That was the report. At least that's the report that was issued to the public. However, I have doubts about the case being open and shut, as you succinctly put it. I think the police have arrested the wrong man. I believe that the suspect the police have in custody is innocent. I'd like to hire you to investigate the matter on your own, to conduct a more thorough investigation. As you say, the police are confident their suspect is guilty. I do not share their confidence. Not at all. I'd like to hire you to find the real murderer.
Hi, I'm Stacey Potter, the author of The Project. I'm going to read to you Chapter 1, The Summit. I carried the cremated remains of my elderly volunteer project in a wooden box in my backpack as I hiked the summit of my favorite Phoenix, Arizona trail. The decision of what to do with her ashes made the backpack feel like it was cutting into my shoulders with each step toward the top. I spent less than one semester with May. I guess people could say I didn't really know her, but now I was responsible for her. I never wanted to volunteer at the nursing home in the first place, I thought as I kicked a small rock on my path, sending it rolling down the mountain. I deserved an A, even though I couldn't finish the 40-hour requirement for my social psych assignment. Who else in the class had had their project die? Literally. It wasn't fair. This whole semester wasn't fair. I like things fair. That was the Libra part of me and why I wanted to go to law school. My brain swirled with all of the memories as I tried to process this last semester of my roller coaster life. The trying months prove that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This too shall pass, and all of that. I wish I could talk to Ryan. He was my go-to person and a source of comfort in times like this. We would sit on his dock overlooking the lake and he'd let me vent. He'd put his arm around my shoulder and kiss the top of my head, saying, "Sabella, it'll be okay. I'm always here for you." After 5 years of loving and trusting him, he turned out to be a liar. The dust from the trail stuck to the tears rolling down my face. I wiped them off with the back of my hand. As I reached the summit, I walked to the edge of the rocky cliff and put my hands on my knees, bending over, trying to regulate my breathing. Was it the climb or the uncertainty of my life going forward that was causing my heart to race? Should I get back together with Ryan? After all, he proposed a few days ago, but could I trust him ever again? On the other hand, I could choose a new path with Ted, unknown and unfamiliar. Was that even an option? Or I could just stand here, hoping that life will choose for me. "Universe, I need a sign," I shouted to the sky.
The house was tall and yellow and old. As we got out of the truck, a red chicken came bustling out from behind the garage. "Oh, look," I cried. "Is that yours?" "That's Celeste," said Maggie. "There's more of them around. That can be your job while you're here. Feed 'em, get the eggs, let 'em out, shut 'em up at night. Chickens are nice. They'll like you." "Me? The chickens would like me?" Maggie scooped up the little red chicken and handed her to me. She showed me how to hold her, and this funny warm body with scratchy feet just sat there in the crook of my elbow making chortling noises. "Told ya," she said. "She's a little needy since the coyote got her sister." "How do you pet a chicken?" Well, she didn't seem to mind no matter how I did it. My room was upstairs. It had creased flowery wallpaper and 3 tall windows with no curtains. Sitting on the squeaky high bed, I felt like I was in a treehouse. After dinner, Maggie asked me if I drank coffee. She was filling up a steel pot with water. "Oh, yeah," I said. "I really need my coffee in the morning." "What kind of coffee maker is that, anyway?" Maggie looked at the pot and then at me. It's a coffee pot," she said. "You know, a percolator." "A what?" Mom had 3 different kinds of coffee makers at home. A bun drip, a French press, and a big shining espresso thing with valves and spigots and stuff that she wouldn't let me use. Maggie laughed. and I felt it's kind of stupid. You put the coffee in here, then just turn the stove on. Water boils up through here, drips back down. You've never seen one? No, guess not. Maggie put a big red plastic jug of coffee back in the cupboard. Already ground, grocery store stuff. Well, it'd be caffeine. I could be polite about it. Then we put the chickens to bed. There were red hens and speckled hens and some big tan ones. Buff Orpingtons, they were called. Maggie introduced them. That's Myrtle, that one's Verna, this one's Dinah. Go on, call them. Chick, chick, chick. They all came hustling and clucking. I poured cracked corn into the feeder in the hen house, and they scrambled inside. Maggie locked up the door. Eggs for breakfast, pretty much every day now. Glad you're here to help us eat them. And quiche and frittatas and cakes. Will you show me? I asked. Sure. Do you cook much at home? Not really. Mom and Daddy, their schedules are all over suddenly I was in tears. I wanted pad thai chicken. No, wait, not chicken, shrimp. And baklava and a giant latte and my dad and, so help me, my mom. And my little cave of a room with blinds I could close with a stick. Maggie put her arms around me with her chin on my head. Look, she whispered, look at the sun. We turned around. The whole sky was lit up in scarlet and turquoise and purple. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and thought, tomorrow I'll set up my camera and take pictures. Maybe every single night at sunset, I'll take a picture at exactly the same moment from the same exact spot. The scalding sun drifted down, and in a moment it was gone. Then Len was standing with us, and we watched the colors flare even brighter and then fade. They say it's going to storm tonight, he said. I hope it does, I said. It did, too. The sky lit up, the thunder erupted, and out of nowhere the rain slashed in. Maggie and I stood at the window and watched the thrashing trees. You get some big winds in Chicago, too, don't you? She said. At home, on the 19th floor, when it blows hard, you can see the water sloshing in the toilet. I said, the whole building sways a little. Good God, cried Maggie, that would scare me. Me too, I confessed. Maggie said, I figure if this house has stood here for 100 years, it'll probably hang on a little longer for us. In the morning, I woke up with the sun glowing outside. 8:15. I never woke up that early. There was an insulated mug on the bedside table with an insurance agent's name on it. The coffee tasted fantastic. There must be something to that percolator thing. I padded down the stairs barefoot. Katie, Maggie called. Quick, come see. She pointed out the big bay window. In the front yard, there were a dozen birds, tall, lean, brown birds with tiny heads stalking around the bushes. Turkeys, she murmured. Wow, I said, you have turkeys and chickens? She laughed. They're not ours. These are wild ones. One of the turkeys suddenly puffed himself up all big and tipped up his tail into a fan. He marched around like Mr. Big Shot, but the girl turkeys just wandered around, picking up stuff in the grass. We laughed. Wild turkeys, blazing sunsets, massive thunderstorms, and delicious coffee from a plain old pot. I definitely was not in Chicago anymore. Go throw on some jeans, said Maggie, and let's see what the chickens have for breakfast. And I learned how to make an omelet.
All the work featured in this episode is available for purchase at bookshop.org/shop/MiPA. Your purchase from Bookshop directly supports independent booksellers, and when you use MiPA's affiliate link, you're directly supporting MiPA's programming as well. Visit bookshop.org/shop/MiPA.